The clinking of crystal glasses against fine porcelain has a distinct, unmistakable sound. It is a sharp musical note that belongs exclusively to the insulated world of the wealthy. Sitting in the dimly lit alcove of Le Bernard, Connecticut's most exclusive French dining establishment, I let that sound wash over me. I took a slow sip of my Pinot Noir, feeling the dry, oaky finish linger on my tongue, and kept my eyes fixed on the center of the room. There they were, bathed in the warm golden glow of a cascading crystal chandelier, sitting at the premier table that required a reservation 3 months in advance. My son, Connor, his wife, Vanessa, and her mother, Beatrice. They were a picture-perfect portrait of American suburban royalty. Connor, at 42, wore his tailored Italian suit like a suit of armor, his hair perfectly coiffed, his smile flashing white and rehearsed. Vanessa, turning 40 today, draped in an emerald silk dress that clung to her artificially maintained figure, her wrist heavy with a new diamond tennis bracelet that caught the light every time she raised her glass. And Beatrice, 65 but fighting it with every expensive cosmetic procedure money could buy, sitting with that rigid, aristocratic posture, looking at the waitstaff as if they were an entirely different species. They were laughing. A rich, booming, carefree laugh from my son that I hadn't heard directed at me in over 5 years. I set my wine glass down. My hand did not shake. My breathing did not hitch. In the movies, when a mother discovers her only child has lied to her, has blatantly, cruelly betrayed her, she weeps. She causes a scene. She questions where she went wrong in raising him. But I am not a woman in a movie, and I have long since outgrown the luxury of naive tears. I am 68 years old today. I spent 35 years as a senior loan processor for one of the most ruthless commercial banks on the East Coast. I didn't just push papers. I dissected financial lives. I looked at spreadsheets and saw the lies people told themselves. I smelled bad debt, hidden assets, and fraudulent intent the way a hound smells blood. And looking at my son right now, I didn't just see a boy who had forgotten his mother's birthday. I saw a man drowning, desperately treading water to keep his wife's delusions of grandeur afloat. Just 12 hours earlier, my day had started entirely differently. I had woken up at 6 a.m. in the quiet 4-bedroom colonial house I had shared with my late husband Arthur for nearly 4 decades. The house was paid off, a testament to Arthur's relentless work ethic and my unyielding financial discipline. Arthur had been a quiet, brilliant man. When he passed away 3 years ago from a sudden stroke, he left behind a meticulously structured estate, a robust 401k, a diverse stock portfolio, and a life insurance policy that brought our total liquid assets to just over $1.8 million. At 7:30 a.m., as I was pouring my first cup of black coffee, the phone rang. The caller ID flashed Connor's name. "Good morning, sweetheart," I had answered, a genuine smile touching my lips. "Mom, hi." "Happy birthday." Connor's voice came through the speaker, rushed and clipped. The background noise was quiet, too quiet for his morning commute. "Listen, I am so sorry, but I have a massive crisis at the branch. The regional directors are flying in, and I have to catch a train to New York immediately. I'm going to be stuck in meetings until midnight." I had paused, holding the warm mug in my hands. "New York? On a Friday evening, Connor? We had reservations for dinner." "I know, Mom, I know. I feel terrible." He sighed, and there it was, the slight, almost imperceptible upward inflection in his tone, the same pitch shift he used when he was a teenager trying to hide a dent in the family car. "I'll make it up to you, I promise. Maybe brunch on Sunday? I have to board the train. Love you, bye." The line had gone dead before I could even reply. I had stood in the kitchen, the silence of the empty house pressing in on me. A familiar cold ache had settled in my chest. It wasn't the first time he had canceled. For the past 2 years, ever since Vanessa had decided my modest lifestyle was an embarrassment to her social climbing, my presence in their lives had been systematically reduced. I was the inconvenient aging mother who didn't fit into their country club aesthetic. They assumed I was fragile. They assumed I spent my days knitting and missing my husband. Most insultingly, Connor assumed I was financially illiterate. When Arthur died, Connor, in his infinite arrogance as a branch manager, had swooped in, insisting on taking care of the difficult paperwork for his grieving mother. He had placed my name alongside his on joint accounts, restructuring the portfolios under his management firm, patting my hand and telling me not to worry my pretty head about the volatile markets. I had let him. I was paralyzed by grief at the time, and I wanted to trust the boy I had raised. But grief fades, and clarity returns. That afternoon, a quiet intuition, the same gut feeling that used to make me deny $500,000 loans to overly confident businessmen, prompted me to log into the banking portal. Not the simplified dashboard Connor had set up for me on my iPad, but the raw, back-end clearinghouse terminal I still had access to through my old industry credentials. What I found there had turned the blood in my veins to ice. But I didn't confront him over the phone. I didn't leave an angry voicemail. Instead, I went upstairs, opened my cedar closet, and pulled out the charcoal gray Armani suit I used to wear to executive board meetings. I pinned Arthur's diamond brooch to the lapel, applied a sharp, unforgiving shade of crimson lipstick, and called a black car service to take me to the most expensive restaurant in town, the exact place Vanessa had posted on her social media she would be celebrating her fabulous 40. And so, here I am, the invisible mother, sitting in the shadows of Le Bernard, watching the spectacle. Vanessa leaned across the table, her voice carrying over the soft jazz playing in the background. Honestly, Connor, the new house is just perfect. The neighborhood is so much more us. But we absolutely must tear out those dreadful marble counters in the guest house. Beatrice agrees, don't you, Mother? Beatrice swirled her martini. Of course, darling. You can't host the charity gala with outdated Italian stone. It's simply not done. Connor, dear, I hope your little bonus this quarter covers the renovations. We can't have Vanessa living in a construction zone. Connor's smile tightened. A microscopic twitch near his left eye betrayed him. Don't worry, Beatrice. Everything is completely handled. Money is not an issue. Money is not an issue. I almost laughed out loud. From my vantage point, I raised my hand and caught the eye of the sommelier. He approached instantly, recognizing the quiet authority of a woman who knows exactly what she wants. Madame, he murmured. That table in the center, I said, my voice low and smooth. The birthday party. I would like to send them a bottle of your finest champagne. The Louis Roederer Crystal, 2012 vintage. I believe you have it in the cellar. The sommelier blinked, surprised by the choice. A $4,000 bottle. An excellent selection, madame. Shall I inform them who it is from? No, I replied, pulling a crisp, heavy stock card from my clutch. I uncapped my fountain pen and wrote a single line in my sharp, elegant cursive. Just deliver this card with the bottle, and pour it for them immediately. Right away, madame. I leaned back into the velvet upholstery of my booth, disappearing entirely into the shadows, and watched the performance unfold. 2 minutes later, the sommelier and an assistant waiter approached Connor's table. The presentation was theatrical, an ice bucket of polished silver, the distinct golden label of the Cristal gleaming under the chandelier. Vanessa gasped, her eyes widening with greedy delight. Beatrice sat up straighter, impressed despite herself. Oh my God, Connor! Vanessa squealed, clapping her hands. Cristal, you shouldn't have. This is incredibly extravagant. Connor stared at this bottle, his face draining of color. He hadn't ordered it. His mind was likely doing a panicked calculation of his maxed-out credit limits. Yes. Only the best for you, honey. Excuse me, sir, the sommelier interjected smoothly, handing the silver tray with the folded card to Vanessa. This was sent with compliments from another patron. Vanessa frowned, snatching the card. From someone else? Let me see. She opened the thick paper. I watched her lips move as she read the words. Happy birthday, Vanessa. Enjoy the celebration. Love, the mother in New York. Vanessa's brow furrowed in utter confusion. The mother in New York? What does that even mean? Connor, is this from one of your clients? She handed the card to him. The moment Connor's eyes scanned my handwriting, the transformation was spectacular. The blood utterly vanished from his face, leaving him looking like a corpse in a tailored suit. His jaw slacked. His eyes darted wildly around the restaurant, scanning the booths, the bar, the shadows. Connor, are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost, Beatrice noted, her tone dripping with sudden disdain. I need to make a phone call, Connor stammered, his voice trembling. He shoved his chair back so violently it scraped against the hardwood floor, drawing stares from adjacent tables. Excuse me, don't touch the wine. Just wait here. He practically bolted toward the rear exit, heading for the secluded outdoor patio. Vanessa huffed, rolling her eyes. Unbelievable. His phone hasn't stopped buzzing all week. If this is about that stupid mortgage delay, I am going to scream. I told him we needed to close on the mansion by Tuesday. or the country club board will hear about it." Beatrice leaned in, her voice dropping to a harsh, conspiratorial whisper. A whisper that, thanks to the perfect acoustic arch of the restaurant's ceiling, carried directly to my secluded booth. "Vanessa, I warned you about his finances," Beatrice hissed. "Your husband is leveraged to the hilt. You think I don't know? My accountant ran a background check before I agreed to let you buy that $5 million estate in Greenwich. He has 3 maxed-out credit cards, and the bank is auditing his branch." "Mother, stop it. He fixed it," Vanessa shot back defensively, though her eyes betrayed a gnawing panic. "He showed me the escrow transfer this morning. The down payment cleared. $1.5 million in pure cash. He told me he liquidated some of his private tech stocks." "Tech stocks?" Beatrice scoffed, taking a sharp sip of her martini. "Don't be a fool, Vanessa. He doesn't have tech stocks. I looked at the routing numbers on the closing documents while he was in the bathroom yesterday. That money didn't come from a brokerage account." "Then where did it come from?" Vanessa demanded, her voice shrill. "It came from a joint retirement trust," Beatrice said, her words slicing through the air like a scalpel. "He drained his mother's accounts, Vanessa. He took the old widow's money, every last cent of her late husband's life insurance and pension. He used a power of attorney to bypass her authorization." Vanessa froze. Then, slowly, a cold, calculating smirk spread across her face. "Really? Well, she's barely using it, is she? Sitting in that dusty old house, drinking generic tea. Besides, Arthur always meant for that money to help Connor. If Connor just moved the timeline up a bit to secure our future, I don't see the harm. Once we sell this house, we can quietly put some of it back before she ever notices. The woman can barely operate a smartphone, Mother. She's clueless." In the shadows, my hands folded perfectly in my lap. My heart beat with a steady, terrifying calm. They thought I was clueless. They thought I was a fragile old woman who would quietly fade into the background while they cannibalized the life Arthur and I had built stone by stone. They believed my silence was ignorance, but a senior loan processor never ignores a discrepancy, and a mother betrayed does not simply demand an apology. I took one final slow sip of my Pinot Noir. I stood up, smoothing the invisible wrinkles from my Armani skirt. The time for observation was over. The trap was already set. It was time to let them hear the steel jaws snap shut. I stepped out of the shadows and walked directly toward the golden light of the chandelier. The heels of my vintage Ferragamo pumps struck the polished mahogany floor with a rhythmic, unhurried cadence. In a restaurant like Le Bernard, where the wealthy patrons speak in hushed, guarded tones and the staff glide over the floors like ghosts, a deliberate footstep sounds like a gavel dropping in a silent courtroom. I navigated the labyrinth of white-clothed tables, my charcoal gray Armani suit acting as a shield of armor. I kept my posture impeccably straight, my chin leveled. Arthur used to say I had the posture of a reigning queen when I was negotiating a tough contract. I channeled every ounce of that professional steel now. Vanessa was the first to notice me. She was in the middle of a shrill laugh, her manicured hand resting lightly on the stem of her crystal flute, when her eyes caught my approach. Her laughter died in her throat. The color drained from her perfectly bronzed cheeks, replaced by a pale, chalky mask of shock. "Martha?" she gasped, her voice entirely devoid of its usual patronizing sweetness. Beatrice turned, her heavily contoured eyebrows pulling together in a sharp V of genuine bewilderment. "Martha? What on earth are you doing here? I thought you were upstate, resting." "I am precisely where I intend to be, Beatrice," I said, coming to a halt at the head of their table. I did not sit down. I merely stood there, looking down at the 2 women who had spent the last 5 years treating me like a senile inconvenience. And I am not tired in the slightest. In fact, I haven't felt this remarkably awake in years. Before Vanessa could formulate a lie, the heavy brass door of the patio swung open. Connor hurried back into the dining room, his phone tightly gripped in his sweaty hand, his face a portrait of sheer panic. He was looking at his screen, muttering curses under his breath, completely oblivious to his surroundings until he nearly collided with me. He stopped dead in his tracks. His chest heaved against his expensive Italian silk tie. For a fraction of a second, I saw the little boy who used to break my favorite vases and try to hide the shards under the living room rug. But that boy was gone. In his place stood a 42-year-old coward wearing a custom-tailored suit he couldn't afford. "Mom!" he breathed out, the words sounding like a death rattle. "Good evening, Connor," I replied, my voice as calm and cool as the ice bucket sitting on their table. How was the train to New York? I must say the commute from the patio to the dining room is much shorter than I anticipated. Connor swallowed hard. His eyes darted to Vanessa, who was staring at him with a mixture of terror and accusation, and then to Beatrice, who looked like she was calculating the exact moment to abandon ship. Mom, please, Connor started, his voice dropping to a harsh, pleading whisper. He reached out to touch my arm, but I took a deliberate half-step back. His hand fell uselessly to his side. Let's not do this here. Let's go outside. Or better yet, let me take you home. We can talk about this in the morning. It's a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, I repeated the word, turning it over on my tongue as if tasting something sour. You lied to me on my 68th birthday to celebrate your wife's milestone with the money you stole from your dead father's estate. Tell me, Connor, which part of that did I misunderstand? Vanessa gasped, looking around frantically to see if the neighboring tables were listening. Martha, keep your voice down. People are staring. You are making a scene. I assure you, Vanessa, if I wanted to make a scene, I would have brought the police, I said smoothly, never taking my eyes off my son. But I prefer to handle family matters with precision. I opened my leather clutch and withdrew my phone. I tapped the screen twice and placed it face up on the pristine white tablecloth, right next to their untouched caviar. 20 minutes ago, while you were drinking my champagne, I made a phone call to the central clearing department of our bank, I said, my tone strictly business. I invoked my rights as the primary account holder, every single joint account bearing my name. Your checking, the emergency savings, the brokerage accounts, and the corporate cards linked to my credit has been completely and permanently frozen. Your access is revoked, Connor. As of this exact second, the credit cards in your wallet are nothing more than useless pieces of plastic. Vanessa let out a choked, horrified noise. She looked at Connor, her eyes wide with a frantic, animalistic fear. Connor? Tell me she's lying. The escrow. The house in Greenwich. If those accounts are frozen, the check bounces on Monday. Beatrice scoffed, slamming her hand down on the table. The crystal glasses trembled. This is outrageous. Martha, you are acting like a hysterical old woman. You cannot do this. Connor is the financial manager of that estate. He has fiduciary rights. I am the sole beneficiary of my husband's estate, Beatrice, I corrected her, my voice turning icy. Connor was merely a guest on those accounts, a guest who has just overstayed his welcome. For a moment there was absolute silence at the table. The jazz music swelled around us. I watched my son closely, waiting for the apology, waiting for the breakdown, waiting for any sign of remorse. Instead, I watched a dark, ugly transformation take place. The panic slowly drained from Connor's face, replaced by a cold, hard sneer. The pleading little boy vanished entirely, leaving behind the arrogant banker who believed he was the smartest person in the room. He straightened his jacket, rolled his shoulders back, and let out a dry, condescending laugh. He slowly reached into his breast pocket and pulled out his phone. You know, Mom, Connor said, his voice dripping with a sudden venomous confidence. For a second there, you actually had me scared. You really did. Freezing the joint accounts? That was a good move. Very dramatic. It's a shame it's completely useless. Vanessa looked at him, bewildered. Connor, what are you talking about? Connor didn't look at his wife. He kept his eyes locked on mine, a victorious smirk playing on his lips. You always underestimated me, Mom. You and Dad both. Dad always thought I was too aggressive with my investments, and you always treated me like I needed my hand held. But I'm not a child anymore. I'm a branch manager. I know how the system works. He tapped a few buttons on his phone and turned the screen toward me. It was a digital PDF of a legal document. A notarized durable power of attorney. Do you remember this, Mom? Connor asked smoothly. Last November, when you had that minor heart palpitation and ended up in the emergency room, I brought you a stack of medical proxy forms to sign so I could make decisions if you were incapacitated. I slipped this in right in the middle. You signed it without reading it. It gives me full, unrestricted legal authority to act on your behalf regarding all financial and real estate matters. Beatrice's eyes lit up with malicious glee. She leaned back in her chair, a triumphant smile spreading across her heavily Botoxed face. Brilliant, Connor. Simply brilliant. I didn't steal anything, Mom, Connor continued, leaning over the table, his voice low and threatening. I acted legally as your authorized proxy to diversify our family's holdings. At 11 a.m. this morning, I used this power of attorney to authorize a wire transfer of $1.5 million from your primary brokerage account into a private offshore LLC that I control. The transfer cleared at 3 p.m. The money is gone. It's out of your name, out of your jurisdiction, and safely tucked away to secure the closing on Vanessa's new house. Vanessa let out a massive sigh of relief, bringing a hand to her chest. Oh, thank God. Connor, you terrified me. You can freeze the empty joint accounts all you want, Mom, Connor sneered, picking up his glass of Cristal and taking a celebratory sip. But the bulk of Dad's money is already mine. I was going to leave you the house and a modest stipend, but after this little stunt, you'll be lucky if I don't put you in a state-run nursing facility by Christmas. He sat back, crossing his arms, looking at me like a hunter admiring a trapped animal. He expected me to shatter. He expected tears, outrage, maybe a physical collapse. Instead, I smiled. It wasn't a sad smile, or a bitter one. It was a genuine, terrifyingly calm smile. The smile of a predator watching its prey step willingly into a snare. A durable power of attorney, I said softly, almost nostalgically. Signed on November 14th of last year. Witnessed by your associate, Marcus Vance, and notarized by the bank's internal clerk. Connor's smirk faltered slightly. Did you honestly believe, Connor? I interrupted, my voice dropping an octave, losing all traces of the gentle mother he thought he knew. That a woman who spent 35 years working as a senior commercial loan processor for Chase Manhattan would sign a legal document without reading every single clause? The color began to drain from Connor's face again. This time, it didn't stop. He went chalk white. I didn't just read it, Connor. I noticed the discrepancy the second you handed me the pen, I said, stepping closer to the table, resting my hands flat on the pristine linen. I leaned in, commanding the physical space, forcing him to look up at me. But I signed it anyway. Do you want to know why? Connor couldn't speak. His throat bobbed as he swallowed dryly. Because I needed you to believe you had the upper hand, I whispered, delivering the words with surgical precision. I needed you to feel confident enough to make a catastrophic mistake. What are you talking about? Beatrice snapped, her triumphant aura suddenly shattering. Connor, what is she talking about? I didn't look at Beatrice. I kept my eyes locked on the terrified man in front of me. You've always been sloppy with your paperwork, Connor. You saw $1.5 million sitting in a brokerage account, and you blinded yourself with greed. You wired it to an LLC account ending in 7842, assuming it was a standard dummy corporation that you could easily drain to pay for Vanessa's ridiculous Greenwich mansion. Connor's breathing became erratic. I checked the routing numbers. It's a private holding account. It's a holding account, yes, I agreed, my voice razor sharp. But it doesn't belong to an LLC, Connor. It belongs to a trust. A trust? Vanessa echoed, her voice trembling. What trust? An irrevocable trust, I clarified, letting the legal term hang in the air like an executioner's axe. I set it up 3 years ago, right after your father died. I quietly moved the bulk of his life insurance into a satellite account attached to that trust. And do you know how an irrevocable trust works, my dear son? Once money goes in, it cannot be taken out, altered, or amended by anyone, not even the person who created it. It belongs entirely to the beneficiary. Connor was shaking now. His hands trembled so violently that his crystal glass clattered against the table. Who is the beneficiary? Your daughter, I said, my voice softening just a fraction at the mention of my granddaughter. Lily, the trust is completely locked until she turns 25. The principal cannot be touched, leveraged, or used as collateral for a mortgage. No, Connor breathed out, a desperate, pathetic sound. No. The wire cleared. I saw it clear. Oh, it cleared, I assured him happily. Because you used your shiny power of attorney to authorize the transfer. You literally signed the paperwork yourself. You took $1.5 million and voluntarily deposited it into your daughter's locked trust fund. Reverse it, Vanessa shrieked, suddenly not caring who in the restaurant heard her. People at the surrounding tables had stopped eating and were staring openly. Connor, call the bank and reverse the wire. Claim it was a mistake. I laughed, a short, dry, humorless sound. He can't, Vanessa. because the only way to reverse a finalized wire transfer into an irrevocable trust is to file a federal affidavit claiming the transfer was unauthorized. Which means Connor would have to go on the official legal record and confess to the FBI that he used a fraudulently obtained power of attorney to steal his mother's money. I leaned back, smoothing my suit jacket, watching the absolute destruction of the man in front of me. So you have a choice, Connor. You can leave the money exactly where it is, safely locked away for Lily's future. Or you can try to take it back, admit to wire fraud and elder financial abuse, and spend the next 10 to 15 years in a federal penitentiary. Checkmate. Connor stared at me, his eyes hollow, completely broken. He had nothing left. No money, no leverage, no escape. The realization that he had trapped himself, that his own arrogance and greed had been the instruments of his downfall, settled heavily over the table. Beatrice looked like she was going to faint. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. The Greenwich House. We have to close on Tuesday. The earnest money is non-refundable. If you don't have the funds... Connor, you promised me. He lied to you, Beatrice, I said simply. Just like he lied to me. The only difference is, I didn't let him get away with it. I picked up my phone from the table and slipped it back into my clutch. The air in the restaurant felt lighter somehow, as if a storm had finally broken. Happy birthday, Vanessa, I said, my tone polite, dismissing them entirely. I hope the Cristal was to your liking. Enjoy the rest of your evening. I turned my back on them and walked away. The clicking of my vintage Ferragamo pumps echoed through the silent dining room, a steady, triumphant march. Behind me, I heard the sound of Vanessa sobbing, the sharp, hysterical accusations of Beatrice, and the deafening, defeated silence of my son. I pushed through the heavy brass doors of Le Bernard and stepped out into the cool Connecticut night air. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the scent of impending rain and absolute freedom. I was 68 years old, and my life was finally, unequivocally, my own. The weekend passed in a state of immaculate, undisturbed tranquility. I spent Saturday pruning the hydrangeas in my garden, and Sunday reading a John Grisham novel on the back porch, a cup of Earl Grey tea resting on the table beside me. My phone remained silent. I had preemptively blocked Connor, Vanessa, and Beatrice. I had no interest in their panicked voicemails or pathetic attempts at negotiation. But on Monday morning, the silence was finally broken. It wasn't a phone call. It was the sound of a key turning in the front door. I paused my sweeping in the hallway as the heavy oak door swung open, revealing my 18-year-old granddaughter, Lily. She stood in the foyer, an oversized Yale sweatshirt swallowing her slight frame, a heavy canvas duffel bag slung over her shoulder. She looked exhausted, her eyes rimmed with red, but there was a sharp, intelligent clarity in her gaze that she had inherited directly from Arthur. "Hi, Grandma," Lily said quietly, dropping the duffel bag onto the hardwood floor with a heavy thud. "Hello, my darling," I replied, setting the broom aside. I didn't ask her why she was here. I simply walked over and wrapped my arms around her. She hugged me back fiercely, burying her face in my shoulder. "It's a war zone over there," she muttered, her voice muffled against my cardigan. Dad spent the entire weekend locked in his home office, screaming at his laptop and throwing things. Mom has been chain-smoking on the patio, crying about country club dues and how she can't show her face in Greenwich. And Grandma Beatrice won't stop yelling about bridge loans. I led Lily into the kitchen and poured her a glass of fresh orange juice. I assumed they figured out I wasn't bluffing. Lily took a sip and offered a small, weary smile. Dad tried to access his emergency line of credit on Saturday morning to pay the contractors. The card was declined at the hardware store. He looked like he was going to have a stroke. "Grandma, what exactly did you do?" I sat across from her, folding my hands on the marble island. "I gave your father a harsh lesson in basic accounting, and I secured your future. There is a trust fund, Lily, $1.5 million. It is in your name, and it is ironclad. It will pay for Yale. It will pay for your medical school if you choose to go. And it will give you the one thing your parents never had: financial independence." Lily stared at me, her eyes widening as the magnitude of the number sank in. "Dad's money? The money he was using for the Greenwich House?" "It was never his money," I corrected her gently. "It was your grandfather's, and now it is yours. I'm sorry you had to be caught in the crossfire, sweetheart, but I could not let them squander Arthur's legacy on Italian marble and country club vanity." Lily looked down at her glass, tracing the rim with her index finger. For a moment, I worried I had pushed too far, that she would resent me for destroying her parents' carefully curated illusion. But then she looked up, her expression hardening into something fiercely resolute. "Don't apologize," Lily said softly. "Mom told Dad she wished they had never had me because my tuition was getting in the way of her renovations. I heard her through the air vent. They care about the image of a family, not an actual family." She looked at me, a genuine, profound gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you, Grandma." "You are welcome to stay here as long as you need," I told her. "Good," she sighed, leaning back in her chair. "Because by Thursday, I don't think they're going to have a house for me to go back to anyway. Beatrice is taking them to a private lender in Stamford this afternoon. She's putting up her estate in Westport as collateral for a hard money loan to save the Greenwich closing." I froze. My coffee cup halted halfway to my mouth. "Beatrice is leveraging the Westport property?" Lily nodded. "She said she owns it free and clear, and that a private equity firm can push the underwriting through in 48 hours. They're signing the papers on Thursday afternoon at the title and escrow office downtown." A slow, chilling smile spread across my face. It was the final puzzle piece sliding perfectly into place. "Are they now?" I murmured, standing up from the stool. I walked over to the kitchen calendar, checking the date. "Well, I suppose I have an appointment to make on Thursday." Thursday afternoon in Stamford, Connecticut was dreary, the sky a bruised purple, threatening a heavy summer downpour. The offices of Crestview Title and Escrow were located on the 14th floor of a sleek glass high-rise. They specialized in high-risk, high-interest private lending, the kind of place desperate people with expensive zip codes go when traditional banks shut their doors. I arrived precisely at 3 p.m. I wore a tailored navy blue blazer, a string of Arthur's pearls, and carried a slim leather briefcase. The receptionist, a young woman with too much lip filler, looked up as I approached. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "Yes," I said, handing her a sleek black business card. "Martha Higgins, representing Apex Asset Recovery. I am here for the Miller-Higgins closing in Conference Room B." She glanced at the card, checked her computer, and nodded. "Right this way, Ms. Higgins. They are just finishing up the final disclosures." She led me down a carpeted hallway and pushed open the heavy glass door of Conference Room B. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. Connor sat at the massive mahogany table, his tie undone, dark circles bruising the skin under his eyes. He looked like a man being led to the gallows. Vanessa sat next to him, furiously tapping her manicured nails on the wood. At the head of the table sat Beatrice, wearing a Chanel suit and an expression of supreme arrogance, looking down her nose at the exhausted loan officer sitting across from them. "This is ridiculous," Beatrice was snapping as I walked in. "I am Beatrice Vanderwood. The Westport estate appraises for $3.2 million. You have the deed. I need the $800,000 wired to the Greenwich escrow account by 5 p.m. today, or I will take my business elsewhere." The loan officer, a balding man named Mr. Davis, adjusted his glasses nervously. "Mrs. Vanderwood, as I was just trying to explain, our underwriters found a complication during the final title search an hour ago. We cannot fund the bridge loan." "A complication?" Vanessa shrieked, half standing out of her chair. "What complication? The house is paid off." "No, Vanessa," a calm, authoritative voice echoed through the room. "It isn't." All three of their heads snapped toward the doorway. Connor physically recoiled, pushing his chair back. Vanessa's jaw dropped. Beatrice's face contorted with rage. "Martha?" Beatrice stood up, pointing a trembling finger at me. "What the hell are you doing here? Are you following us? Get out!" I ignored her, walking calmly to the empty chair at the end of the table. I set my leather briefcase down with a soft, final thud. "I am not following you, Beatrice," I said smoothly, taking a seat and crossing my legs. "I was invited, or rather, legally required to be here. As the primary lien holder on your property, state law mandates I be present for any secondary financing agreements." The room went dead silent. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning. Connor blinked, his exhausted brain struggling to process the words. "Primary lien holder? Mom, what are you talking about?" I unlatched my briefcase, pulled out a thick, legal-sized folder, and slid it across the polished mahogany table toward Mr. Davis. "Mr. Davis, you pulled the title report, correct?" I asked politely. "Yes, ma'am. the loan officer said, visibly sweating now, realizing he was caught in the middle of a vicious family war. There is a massive home equity line of credit on the Westport property, drawn out 5 years ago. It's been in default for over 24 months. Vanessa whipped her head around to stare at her mother. A HELOC? Defaulted? Mother, what is he talking about? You said you owned the house. Beatrice's aristocratic facade cracked. A flush of ugly, dark red crept up her neck. It was a temporary draw, she stammered, avoiding her daughter's eyes. To pay for your wedding, Vanessa, and the country club dues and the trips to Aspen. My alimony didn't cover it. The bank sold the debt to some predatory third-party collection agency. I've been ignoring their letters, assuming they'd write it off. They didn't write it off, Beatrice, I said, leaning forward, resting my elbows on the table. I looked directly into the eyes of the woman who had mocked my clothes, my house, and my lifestyle for a decade. The bank packaged your toxic debt and sold it for pennies on the dollar. 30 cents on the dollar, to be exact. I tapped the folder sitting in front of the loan officer. 5 years ago, I continued, my voice steady and completely devoid of mercy. When I noticed you drinking $1,000 wine while constantly forgetting your wallet, I suspected you were living on borrowed time. So I took a little of Arthur's money and formed a quiet LLC called Apex Asset Recovery. When your debt hit the secondary market, my company bought it. Connor's eyes widened to the size of saucers. He looked from me to the folder to his mother-in-law. You bought Beatrice's debt? I own the paper on your Westport estate, Beatrice, I said softly, delivering the killing blow. You owe Apex Asset Recovery $650,000 in principal, plus 2 years of compounding default interest and late fees. The total payoff is currently sitting at just over $920,000. Beatrice slumped back into her chair, the breath knocked completely out of her lungs. Now, I said, turning my attention to the terrified loan officer. Mr. Davis, in order for Crestview Escrow to issue this new bridge loan to my son, you need me, the primary lien holder, to sign a subordination agreement, allowing your company to take priority on the title. Is that correct? Mr. Davis swallowed hard and nodded. Yes, Ms. Higgins, that is standard procedure. I pulled a silver Mont Blanc pen from my blazer pocket. I picked up the subordination agreement that Mr. Davis had printed out. I held the pen over the signature line. Connor leaned forward, his hands clasped together, literally begging. Mom, please, if you don't sign that, we lose the Greenwich house. We lose the deposit. I'll be bankrupt. I looked at my son, really looked at him. I saw the greed, the vanity, the utter lack of moral spine. I saw the man who had sat at a luxury restaurant on my birthday, drinking my champagne, laughing while he plotted to drain my bank accounts and put me in a nursing home. I know, Connor, I whispered. I capped the pen. I did not sign the paper. Instead, I slid the blank document back to Mr. Davis. I declined to subordinate, I announced clearly. Furthermore, as the CEO of Apex Asset Recovery, I am officially calling the note due. Beatrice, you have 30 days to pay the $920,000 balance in full. If the funds are not in my account by the 1st of next month, I am initiating foreclosure proceedings on the Westport estate. Beatrice let out a sound like a dying animal. She buried her face in her hands, her Chanel suit suddenly looking like a cheap costume. Vanessa jumped to her feet, her chair crashing to the floor behind her. But she didn't yell at me. She didn't yell at her mother. She turned her absolute venomous fury onto Connor. You absolute loser, Vanessa screamed, her voice echoing off the glass walls. You told me you had the money. You told me you were a financial genius. You stole from your mother. You screwed it up. And now my mother is losing her house? I am done. We are done, Connor. I'm calling a divorce attorney the second I leave this building. She snatched her Birkin bag from the table and stormed out of the conference room, her heels clicking violently against the floor. Beatrice, sobbing hysterically, stumbled up and followed her daughter out, leaving Connor entirely alone. He sat there in the deafening silence, staring blankly at the empty chairs. His wife was gone. His mother-in-law was ruined. His career was effectively over the moment the bank caught wind of his fraudulent wire transfer. The facade of his perfect upper-class American life had been completely pulverized. I stood up, snapped my briefcase shut, and walked toward the door. Mom, Connor whispered, a broken, hollow sound. What am I supposed to do now? I paused at the threshold, looking back at him one last time. You do what I did, Connor, I said evenly. You survive the bed you made for yourself. 3 months later, the Connecticut autumn arrived, painting the trees in brilliant shades of amber and crimson. The Westport estate was foreclosed on in late October. I sold it to a developer for a handsome profit, funneling the proceeds directly into Lily's irrevocable trust. Vanessa filed for divorce, fighting Connor over the scraps of debt they had accrued together. Connor moved into a cramped one-bedroom apartment in a less desirable zip code, quietly resigning from the bank to avoid criminal prosecution, taking a job as a mid-level accountant at a car dealership. I sat on my back porch, wrapped in a thick wool shawl, watching the autumn leaves fall into the garden. Lily sat beside me, her laptop open as she filled out early admissions applications for college. She looked over at me, smiling over her mug of hot apple cider. Yale's financial aid office called today. They reviewed the trust documents. Everything is cleared for the spring semester. Good, I smiled back, taking a sip of my tea. Society has a very specific script for women over 60. We are expected to be soft, nostalgic, and endlessly forgiving. We are expected to shrink, to hand over our hard-earned security to the next generation and quietly fade into the background of their bustling lives. But as I sat there, listening to the wind rustle through the trees of a house I owned entirely, looking at a granddaughter whose future was completely secured, I realized the ultimate truth about power. Power does not diminish with age. It sharpens. The greatest strength a woman possesses is not her youth, nor her capacity for forgiveness. It is the quiet, terrifying ability to watch the people who underestimate her build their own traps, and having the absolute, unyielding discipline to simply let them step inside. I took another sip of my tea. It was going to be a beautiful winter,